Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. Good to be with you at sort of the start of a new week, but you probably feel you're about 25% or 20% of the way through it already. A strong update today from Pick n Pay. And no matter where you stand, no matter how you feel about which shopping centre, which supermarket chain you prefer to go to, it's nice to see that a company can do very, very well, run into trouble and then recover, and certainly get a sense that there is a recovery on the way. I was saying to someone a little earlier today that the book of the recovery is probably more interesting and a lot more complicated than the book of the launch, if you catch my drift. That in fact, in some ways, that's really the sort of learning for any business person, not so much how to launch something. Not many of us get involved in the launch of something. Some of us have been lucky enough to do that. But actually how you make something recover, that might be the kind of book that comes out of all of this, of course. And we'll speak to Sean Summers in just a moment, but still a huge amount of work to do and a lot that needs to be getting on with. And the fact that they're now only going to break even in 2028 rather than 2027 does suggest that maybe there are one or two things that are not going as smoothly as they would like. Talking of recoveries, we'll speak to the CEO of African Bank, Kennedy Bongani, in about 10 minutes from now. A lot going on there too, and of course they've got big plans for the future. And then in a little while we'll also hear from the currently the person running Eltron. There's a lot going on in that company as well. A lot of results out today, including from Barlow World. But an interesting statement from the company Zero Carbon Charge, and what they're trying to do is they want to actually manage a situation where they're able to create renewable charging points for cars every 150 kilometers on the main highway. So if you're driving from Cape Town to Joburg, at least every 150 k's, there'll be a way for you to recharge your electric car if that's how you are going to do things. Now look, in this country, a country as big as ours, if anyone is going to move to electric cars on a large-scale basis, you need to be able to do that. And I remember very well, I won't mention the brand, but I remember very clearly when a particular brand said, we have an electric charging station in Harrismith. And the reason they had it in Harrismith was it was halfway between Durban and Joburg, and they were making the point you could do the whole N3 on their car. The thing is, though, that 100 million rand, which is what the Development Bank of Southern Africa is putting into Zero Carbon Charge, and they are doing it renewably, I don't know if that's going to be enough. This is a company with big plans. There's a lot for them to do, but it is a huge amount of work that they need to do as well. We'll watch that one very closely. In fact, see if we can speak to Zero Carbon Charge in the next couple of days and just hear how that plan's going. Good to hear from you tonight on 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes this evening on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, Pick n Pay is saying today it's been able to make important progress in its road to recovery, able to stem the amount of money it's been losing. It lost only 237 million rand in the financial year to the end of March. I mean, compare that with the loss last year of 1.5 billion rand. The retailer also saying it now expects to break even in 2028 rather than 2027. As you know, the CEO, Sean Summers, has agreed to stay on until 2028 to finish that project. And he's on the line for you now. Sean Summers, good evening. Good to talk to you again. An important financial year to stem the losses, and the way you must have does show that some things, and quite a few things, many things, do seem to be going in the right direction.
Certainly. Good evening. It's obviously been both a busy day and a busy year. And I think that, in short, we have dealt with some of the fundamental issues that bedeviled us as a company. And the major thing, first of all, was remedying the balance sheet challenges that we had. And that was stepped through and done with the rights offer process. And then obviously the listing of Boxer as well, and the unlock of our sort of a third odd that we cashed out. So we ended the year in a very different situation to the one that we started. So that was very, very positive. And I think, Stephen, one of the things that I'm particularly pleased about, there was when I returned on the 18th of October 2023, sort of 15 months or 16 months ago. If we have a look at what lay ahead of us then and where we are now, I did make a prediction then that this turnaround would be a multi-year program. And I said that things would get worse before they got better. And I think that the last couple of rounds have been proof of that. With regard to your observation that we're now predicting a return to break even in 2028 as opposed to 2027, when I did share with the market in May last year the turnaround strategy for the company, I did at that stage highlight, people ask me, what is the thing that still keeps you awake at night? And I said, there may be some slippage. I think, it's reasonable to assume that in a large company like ours, there are many things that one has to get hold of. And one thing that did become apparent was that we needed to invest ahead of the recovery. So no quick wins, because they're usually done at a medium to long-term compromise, was the first issue. And then the other one was the prediction we gave in October at the last results announcement that we would reduce our losses by 50%. And I'm pleased and proud to say that the team has managed to do that by almost 2/3. So I feel that the cycle that we were going through of things getting worse before better has now reached the bottom. And from here on in, it will be an upward trajectory. But we still have many issues that we need to deal with in the organization going forward. That is all part and parcel of our plan.
Has there been anything in particular that surprised you, that was harder to do or was a bigger job to do than you actually expected? I mean, a lot of work has been done. We can see that. And as you say, you're sort of sticking to the plan. But has there been anything that was surprisingly difficult or a surprisingly bigger problem? Let me put it like that.
Let me say this to you very simply. When I have a look at the results that we posted now, there's nothing in there that surprises me. There's nothing in there that shocks me. And there's nothing in there that frightens me. Does it still upset me that we're still losing money? Yes. And that's just an exigency of the situation that the company found itself in. One of the things that did, in a way, not really surprise me, Stephen, because as I've said many times today, you can only be as happy as your unhappiest child. And Pick and Pay having been a part of my life, I had an inkling of what the woes were within the company, not to the degree that we had lost our sort of institutional muscle memory in the company. All great organizations do have an institutional muscle memory that clearly understand what it is they do, what is important, what are their real values. And to a degree, that had been lost in the company, sadly. And that's the journey that we're on, is restoring that institutional muscle memory.
We know in this sector, the retail sector, and particularly supermarkets, pricing is absolutely key. People do shop around. Often supermarkets won't be in the same shopping centre, but people move around to go and look for competing value. And we can see from your competitors how they keep price down. And that matters. How difficult is it for you to compete against them? And in-store inflation, I suppose, would be the measure, when you're also making so many changes and doing so many other things at the same time?
Let's just say we've had a bit of hay on the fork this year. You can make that's absolutely a statement of fact. But I'm proud that in the year past, we've got ourselves absolutely competitive again. We're equal to the market. I think anybody who stands up and says across the board we're the cheapest today in a very competitive market. So we're absolutely price competitive today. And that is a reality. While we've been dealing with all of the other issues, I'll say this. I think that the toughest job of any CEO in this space at the moment is most probably mine. I can think of other organizations that are a lot easier to run than ours currently. But then nobody said this was going to be easy.
In a way, I suppose that's the point of it. You also have updated your delivery app, the whole app for the entire supermarket chain. Is that as important as everybody says it is? You know, everybody's talking about home deliveries. Of course, we all sort of know why. And it has been the sort of area in your store too that's been growing the most, and we can understand that too. Is that going to be as important as everyone says it is? I mean, it looks like it at face value.
I think absolutely it is a growing phenomenon. And, if we cast our minds back about 25 years ago when I was head of Pick n Pay, we were the first chain to launch home shopping in those days. And I mean, in those days, you'd either fax your order through or phone up the company. So this is nothing new for us. It's obviously reached a completely new level today in terms of delivering goods to homes in a just-in-time, sort of within the hour kind of demand. So it is a growing phenomenon. There is a sector of the market that's absolutely what they want. But the vast proportion of the business that we all still do is physically in store. And I think that the trick going forward into the future is to find the correct balance between bricks and clicks. So you have to find the appropriate physical infrastructure that you have in the company that suits the forward market. So I don't think that it's a race to see how many stores one can have. I don't think that having the most stores is going to be a good place to be in the future. It's more a case of which stores where and the quality of your estate.
The next big change you're going to have to implement, I mean, I presume you already know what it is, and I suppose at some point you'll also start to have to open new stores, or you are already, I presume. Is there a big change on the horizon you can see?
As I say, I mean, I speak about restoring our institutional muscle memory, and I think, Stephen, in life, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And, I've used the analogy when I returned here, when I was growing up and in the early 60s, when I would have been 7, 8-year-old, my mum used to phone the grocery store in Rondebosch at the Fountain, and the fellow would arrive on the bicycle an hour or two later with the paper bags in the front. So what's changed? The app replaces the old phone that you used to have to sort of dial on with that circular dial, and the scooter replaces the bicycle. So we're not eating more times a day because of the internet, and our needs as a consumer have not changed. We want better fresh, we want better variety, we want faster service. So in and of itself, there are certainly major nuances that have changed. But the cycle and process in and of itself hasn't. And if I look at the greatest chain that I hold out as being the best chain in the world today, Wegmans in America, if you look at their moat that they build around the company, it's about really doing the areas of fresh food in a properly inspirational way. And that's where we need to restore the intellectual and the institutional capacity in the company. So that's where a lot of our focus is going to be going forward from here, because it's one of the areas that we did lose our momentum in the organization. Bearing in mind that we were the first, if you look back to the late 90s, when we did our whole Vuselela refurbishment of Pick n Pay in those days, we were the first ones to really open up fresh food, pull all of the stuff onto the floor. So we were the trailblazers. And then we kind of fell out of love with what we were doing, and emphasis shifted elsewhere. So we need to get back to being shopkeepers.
Sean Summers, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. The CEO at Pick n Pay.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
African Bank reporting today it's been able to increase the amount of money it's lent to customers by around 20% in the 6 months to the end of March. Most of that came from its business and commercial sector. That was up by 49%. Personal banking up by only 3%. And in fact, 37% of its personal banking units loans do not appear to be performing. Kennedy Bungane is the CEO at African Bank. Kennedy, good evening. I really appreciate the time. 37% of your personal loans are not performing. That's quite a high number. What do you think's driving that?
Stephen, grateful to be here. And so you're absolutely correct. The growth that we're reporting, over 15% of NPAT in the period, is driven by 49% growth in business and commercial assets. It's driven by a significant 36% uplift in transactional banking, and all the new businesses that we said were the core of our Accelerate strategy to diversify from unsecured lending and build a more de-risked, diverse revenue streams that are scalable and that will enable us to be a fully fledged bank. And this strategy, Stephen, was because we understood that the glory of high risk, high return, unsecured lending business has got its limitations as it pertains to what happens in tough economic conditions, to credit loss ratios, to NPLs, and to capital charge. Now, you are correct in saying we only grew in personal banking by 3%. That is the lowest in a long time. We are able to do so because we now have got optionality. We've got an ability to grow as a normal bank in other assets and transactional services revenues. When this bank was curated in 2014, 2016, the non-performing loans were over 45%. We're reporting at half year that our overall non-performing loans ratio at 29.6%. It's the lowest this bank has had in over 2 decades. And that's because of the diversification effect of business and commercial, but also the fact that we're doing the hard work with respect to regrounding our credit scorecard, cleaning up our competencies with respect to sales and collections, and treating customer well, and then being able to help customers through life moments. And so the 36.9% of NPLs in personal banking alone, that's an improvement. It's still high, but it's an improvement from where we come from. And we are hoping to return in terms of originating personal loans in the second half of the year with a much more competent ability to manage those NPLs even lower going forward.
It's very interesting to watch that process. Your business and commercial sector, as you say, doing very well. Are you seeing more demand for credit, or are you taking market share from competitors? Are you able to tell?
Well, our worldview is slightly nuanced, Stephen. We're a bank that was established by entrepreneurs to meet the needs of the underserved and underserviced entrepreneurs, and so our focus is very much on the middle and bottom of the pyramid with respect to business and commercial. And the more we bring capabilities such as those acquired from Greenroad Bank, UBank, Sesfin, commercial property and capital equipment, that natural market to African bank validates us with doing more and more business with us. You know, when we started out on this Accelerate strategy, we had only 1.1 million active customers. We're reporting in this period over 6.1 million customers who are, showing us a vote of confidence, not just in the numbers by which they pay us patronage, but also with the diverse number of products and services that they choose from us. We think that this is the natural market for African Bank, and it is responding in kind to a strategy to diversify our capabilities, bring more solutions to them. And that's how we measure success. It isn't just in the millions of customers, but in what they do with us. And then an ability to register a 15% uplift on the bottom line when our biggest and traditional business and personal banking has in fact not grown at all.
There's quite a lot of competition in this space. I mean, you sort of think of banking for entrepreneurs and you kind of think of one or two big names. Are you finding the competition a little difficult to compete with? I mean, you have your own bank, your own established name, of course. But are you finding it is quite competitive?
Even I think it's much welcome, to be honest with you. This is an area, in my view, of this is our biggest soft underbelly as an economy. If you compare the size of the middle and bottom of the pyramid sector in equivalent emerging market economies, ours is the slowest and the smallest by far. And that is why our GDP growth I think, has been handicapped for so long. That is why we're not creating the kind of employment opportunities we should, and that is why we've got such high failure rate in the SME and entrepreneur space. The more players pivot to the African bank traditional market, the more market failure reduces. And in fact, I think it will be good for the economy as a whole. And so I think this is the one area where competition is significantly welcome. I find, though, Stephen, and this is not to cast aspersions, I find that quite a lot of people who speak to you about getting into SMEs and focusing into SMEs, because of the natural disposition of those financial institutions, actually end up in the large medium sector, your 500 million annual turnover type play, because that does mimic your large corporate sector in how it's organized and how it's set up and so forth. It's much more difficult to actually go below that turnover to the mass market of entrepreneurs, which is where we aim to win with digital lending, digital credit scoring capability, and the ecosystem approach that we bring with our offering. I have not seen the dial move in that part of this market where we plan to make a dent.
Interesting and very important observation. Kennedy Bongane, thank you, the CEO at African Bank.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Gustav Schulenberg's a portfolio manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Gustav, good evening. Pick and Pay, you heard Sean Summers a few moments ago, quite confident about the future. I think he probably has reason to be.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen, and thanks for having me, and good evening to all your listeners. Encouraging results from Pick and Pay this morning, and I was listening to Sean chat, and it seems like he's quite clear on his focus and how he intends to get there. It's obviously a tough environment to trade your way out of trouble, but he seems very clear and confident that they will succeed.
And African Bank, you just heard their CEO, Kennedy Bongane, a moment ago. I mean, certainly there seems to be some improvement in some of their big metrics.
Yeah, it does. It's obviously the equity is not listed, so it's more for debt holders. But it seems like they're also kind of getting to grips with everything and on the right path. Everything is improving.
Barlow World, still their results out today. I mean, a 5% revenue decline in Southern Africa. Still, of course, dramatically impacted by what's happening in Russia and their Russian operations. That's something they're still battling with.
Yeah, it is. I think the whole debacle in Russia has sadly taken much.
We seem to have lost the line there to Gustav Schulenberg. Sorry about that. But as you know, they have had some problems with Barlow World. And of course, there are other issues around to speak to them about as well at the moment. But certainly, it does seem, unfortunately, that we've lost that line. Gustav Schulenberg is a portfolio manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group, bringing the time to just after 6:30.
Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Well, 17 minutes now to 7 the time. Good to hear from you this evening on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. Have you noticed a change when you go to Pick and Pay? Have you noticed that anything has shifted at all? What still needs to happen to sort of make you go back if you are going to go back? And we speak so often to the people who've been doing very, very well in this space, the ShopRites, etc. Made the point earlier that the sort of book to read about companies is often the companies that recover, not just the starting of the companies. Everyone's sort sort of excited by that, and we understand why. Often companies start when there's a sort of tailwind behind them. Think of Bill Gates and microcomputers, or Capitec and micro-lending, for example, or Elon Musk, and never mind. But you know the point that I'm trying to make is that actually trying to recover a big business in a very established market like Pick n Pay maybe is the more interesting story in the longer term.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
The technology group Eltron, they own Netstar among many others, reporting a big jump in annual profits of nearly 60% for the year to the end of February. Even though its revenue was flat at 9.6 billion rand, did sell its ATM business, EBITDA up 27% to 1.82 billion rand. All in all, it seems a very, very strong set of results from Eltron. Their CEO is Werner Kapp. Werner, good evening. I appreciate the time. You've made some changes to the group. You sold the NTM part. What difference has that made to the way in which you're operating? I presume it allows you to concentrate more on what you want to concentrate on.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we're obviously delighted to be able to deliver what, I think is an outstanding performance in this continued, tough economic conditions. And I think very much what you've just mentioned, about just over 2 years ago, we really set out this strategy to focus on being the leading platform and IT services business in our chosen markets. And that was really premised on, absolutely focused to make sure that we've got high quality technology assets that can really help our customers on this digital transformation journey, which is continuing unabated. We didn't see the ATM business as core to that, which is really the reason why we've disposed of it. And, that's really helped us to firstly reallocate capital, invested in expanding our platform ecosystem. I think you've probably seen some great results. That's really a big driver of this growth for us. We've managed to grow revenue in those platform businesses by about 12%. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's focus. I think it's making sure that we've got the right businesses that bring the right value to our customers, and then really investing in high margin, profitable annuity business.
The number of subscribers to your vehicle tracking service, Netstar, it was up by 16%, and obviously that has an impact on your overall results, a very nice impact. Are you seeing more demand for that service?
Yeah, so Netstar turned 30 last year, so it was really a nice milestone to be able to cross the sort of 2 million subscriber base. Significant growth, particularly in the South African business there. I think we've grown our subscribers by about over 13% there. We do see strong demand for that growth. And maybe if I can unpack that a little bit, we still see strong consumer demand. So the consumer business growing by about 10%. But where we've really worked quite hard on over the last couple of years is also to, pivot out of just a traditional stolen vehicle recovery business. We've invested in something that we call big data as a service. We launched a global fleet bureau last year in April, and what that really is aimed at is to provide proactive managed services to these large enterprise fleets, and that's driven growth in that enterprise business. That's grown by sort of over 13%. So, absolutely, we continue to see a surging demand for those businesses in the South African market.
The way in which, if I recall, you started was that it was basically a satellite tracker. So the tracker is hidden in the car somewhere and a satellite can track it. I presume in many places now you can do that with a cell phone, and some companies already do that. Is the sector and the technology that it uses changing dramatically or significantly?
Yeah, there is a significant change in the technology, and we've changed along with that. We've launched a number of new products during the last financial year, one of which is our narrowband IoT device. In other words, rather than get the tracking position from satellite, it actually gets it by engaging with other vehicles in the proximity to what we call a mesh network. But I think ultimately what we're getting at is, we conceive that there could well be a time in this market that either the vehicles don't need that tracking, the physical tracking device, or it'll be device agnostic. And where we see that going and what we're investing in, I mean, that's firstly why you'll see us call out quite a lot our partnerships with the OEMs, where the tracking device becomes embedded in the car. We actually fit that telematic device on the factory floor, and that's where that big data as a service that I talk about comes in. In other words, it becomes less about the device and more about the data and how you can use that data and turn it into actionable insights for our customers.
You run several businesses across different areas of the technology space, and I think, everyone will think the world is changing more quickly than it used to. Do you find that you're having to spend more time, more energy, and I presume more money on keeping up with what's changing, or making sure that your moat of innovation is big enough? I mean, are you actually seeing the pace of change being quicker now than it has been in the past?
Look, philosophically, I think every generation has felt that the pace of change is dramatic. I do think that advances in technology is becoming a lot more rapid, and we see that as an opportunity. I mean, that's actually one of the core tenets of our strategy, is that we find that to some extent our customers can sometimes be overwhelmed by this pace of change. And it's really our job to guide them through that. I think that's the first part. I mean, the second part, absolutely, in terms of investing in it, that's why we've gotten out of these businesses that we don't think are relevant in that world, and very much reinvesting that in our data capabilities, in our artificial intelligence capabilities, in our software and platform capabilities.
Werner Kapp, thank you very much indeed, the CEO at Eltron.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, I don't know how you feel about brands and comparing South African brands and African brands with other brands. And the release over the weekend of Africa's best brand results, they seem to show that while there's actually quite a lot more optimism on the African continent more generally, very few of the biggest brands in the minds of people from Africa are in fact from Africa. In other words, foreign brands, you could argue, are still dominating the minds of our people. One of the top African brands, though, is MTN. The top brand across the continent is Nike. Tebe Ikalafeng is the founder and chair of Brand Africa. Tebe, always good to talk to you. Good evening. How do you conduct this assessment? I mean, how do you even begin to work out the power of brands relative to each other across a market as big as Africa?
Right. So, we started this in 2010. 2011 is the first time when I launched the Brand Africa study. And we started with 8 countries, and we did an omnibus. So we jumped onto an existing research to find out just a quick test. But then we changed it, and then we went to mobile, because mobile is the most penetrative, it is most across the continent, you can reach that. And we partnered with Geopol and Kantar and did the research across the continent. We asked them really a few questions, not too many, because it's an admiration study. And we asked them just 7 questions to try and estimate which are the most admired brands. And imagine we're now in 31 countries, and the 31 countries collectively account for 85% of the continent's population and 85% of the GDP. That's how we get to it.
Okay. MTN is seen as the top African brand for helping a better Africa, a sort of positivity, if you like. How have they been able to do that? Now, a large part of it is just their size and then the number of years in the market.
Well, I think it's size, of course, but I think the most important thing is impact. What a brand like MTN has been able to do, and I mean, if you look at the list, the two big South African brands, you've got MTN way ahead in the top 10 in the continent. Then you further down, you'll find DSTV, if you will. So what's the common denominator between the two of them? They've really helped to transform the continent. One, from enabling the continent to tell its story from the television, but from MTN to enable the continent to be able to transact, to communicate, and to do business. I mean, I think that's what MTN has done. It's been an impactful and transformational brand, and as DSTV, the other South African brand.
Dangote is quite a different company, quite a different brand, and yet it's also been incredibly successful.
Well, Dangote is a model of industrialization. What we talk about here in South Africa, I remember a few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, there was a big hoo-ha meeting with the Chinese and people from all over the world, and people say from government that we are going to create 100 industrialists in 3 years. And I remember saying to one of the ministers there, because I was facilitating the conversation, I said, Minister, it's impossible. The New South Africa has been around for 25 years. And you are talking about doing in 3 years what we haven't been able to do in 20. So it's impossible. It takes time to do this. Dangote has been at this for years. He's been at this for years. Probably 30, 40 years are working on this. I mean, what he's been able to do is to create an industry, to industrialize, scale, and inspiration. Like if you go to Nigeria, for example, and you walk around the market, you'll see people with a picture of Dangote selling flour, selling oil, but they've got a picture here because there's a confidence in the person himself. Now I was walking around just the streets in Niger, and I was in Niger and many other countries in Chad, and I saw paper bags of cement from Dangote. And I said to myself, I guess that's what it is. He helps people to build a future, to build a country. And that's what the brands do. The MTNs, the Dangotes, the DSTVs, they are transformational. They enable a country or a people to build something.
I was interested, one of the questions you asked was about the brands of nations, so outsiders to Africa. And the US, the UK and China, the most influential countries in Africa. So the US I understand, and I mean, you can't really argue with sort of culture and television, okay? And we can see China's influence. I was slightly surprised that the UK is still so influential. Sure, former colonial power, etc., but as a nation, it's really withdrawn from most of the world and withdrawn from Africa, and yet it still has that brand power.
Of course. What is the number one media brand in Africa? If you ask, so if you want to ask a spontaneous question, DSTV will come up. But if you ask the prompted question, what's the number one most admired media brand? They are going to mention BBC. It's been number one for many years. Because what has BBC done? BBC is part of most people's lives every day in the continent. It enables people to, and they speak in multiple languages, remember? BBC has a channel, or BBC World Service, they're in radio, and radio is accessible to a lot of people. They do it in Kiswahili, they do it in Yoruba, they do it in all those languages. And of course, it's not just that, but it is also from a branding perspective. What we looked at the brands, not just we looked at brands not just from one category. We looked at them across 7 categories. We looked at them as we look at them from media. We look at them from country that contribute the most to a country. We look at them across generations, Gen Z to Gen Y to Gen X and Z, and all those. We really look at them across board, and the UK is still very much in the play.
It's a big warning to the Trump administration for shutting down Voice of America, isn't there?
One of the biggest UK brands, by the way, is Vodafone.
Yeah, yes, of course.
We forget that, right? So between Vodafone and BBC, you've got people talking. So.
Tepe, the other thing that surprised me, the most admired African nation in Africa is South Africa. And I wondered if maybe it shows that we're a little hard on ourselves sometimes.
South Africa is always hard on itself, but don't forget, certainly in the last 18 months or so, South Africa has been top of mind for many reasons. Whether it's its stance on the Middle East in relation with Palestine, or whether it's Trump this thing, or what it is. But that's just the other political side. But on the non-political side, if you look at the Amapiano and all those things, changing the world, you look at Amaxhosa all over the world, you look at Batu. So South Africa has always been a very inspirational country. And as South Africans, we tend to underestimate who we are and the influence that we have. You know, I was in Ethiopia recently on the weekend to announce these global results in Ethiopia. Naturally, I did it at the Africa Hall, which is where all the presidents got together in 1963 to announce an agenda for the continent. And I was there and was moving around, and people, the taxi driver says, "Oh, where are you from?" It's South Africa. Like, "Oh, South Africa, Mandela." Even Bafana, even though they've won nothing in 100 years, but people still have a good memory of 1996 when they won something.
They're on the right road, I think, Tebe. Tebe, thank you very much indeed. Good to hear from you. Tebe Kalafeng, founder and chair of Brand Africa, and no longer the founding chair of the Bafana Bafana fan club, I think it's safe to say. Good evening, you with The Money Show, 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes, brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. We'll speak to the chair of Nedbank, Daniel Mminele, in a moment or two. He's been writing a paper, very interesting actually, talking about the role that South Africa and Africa should be playing in reforming a global financial architecture. I mean, one of the concerns, one of the problems that I had when I was looking at the thing, at it was, you know, normally when you try and reform financial architecture, the people with the money are the ones who write the rules, and you need to kind of get around that. Well, we'll see if we're able to, and just see what he has around that. In your business book review, Professor Joseph Stiglitz has written The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society. Fascinating, actually. A bit of a rebuke, it would seem, to sort of traditional capitalism and perhaps to the people currently in the White House. And then Lisa Raleigh, the founder of the Lisa Raleigh Group, making money out of health and fitness and how she did it. A fascinating way into it, actually. She did it in a way, I don't think I've ever come across someone who got into a particular business in the way that she did. She'll tell you her story from 7:30.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
Fascinating comment from the chair, the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, today, saying that the euro could be a viable alternative to the dollar, and particularly if the strength of the European financial and security architecture improve. She's making several points there. One is that the euro is not just going to replace the dollar with the European Central Bank and the Europeans doing nothing. The nations of Europe would have to work more closely together, also suggesting they need to strengthen their financial architecture. And then on top of that, she says they need to ensure that they have a proper working military. In other words, to be blunt, they need to not be vulnerable to military attack, I suppose, by Russia. But it was an interesting comment that she made. It did make me think a little bit about, if you put that together with the conversation we were having with Tebe Kalafeng just a moment ago about Africa and how South Africa is seen and how important that is, that there is a big role for us to play, in my view, not just in leading Africa, but in fact, particularly now, in leading the G20. And I say that because of what the G20 is sort of under attack from. And you saw President Ramaphosa asking President Trump quite deliberately, I mean, literally changing the subject, and wouldn't you, to the G20 in the Oval Office last week, asking him if he was going to come and saying, well, as the US, you formed it, you started the G20, we don't want to hand it over to an empty chair, you should be there. And it seems to me that in this particular moment, when the global south, when other countries are looking at a kind of response to Trump, and look at what's happened in Australia and Canada, two nations that went to the left because of Trump. I mean, that's fascinating. So when that happens, that suggests to me that people are looking for leaders, and perhaps, just perhaps, South Africa could be a country that does that. I just have to say, though, it will not be easy. It will actually be quite difficult, but there is certainly space for us to actually do that. And I think that is going to be something that's very interesting to watch. But Christine Lagarde's comments come, of course, as the dollar has been weaker, the euro has been stronger. We all know why that is. But it also makes you wonder how much longer this can go on for. How much longer people in the US are going to allow the Trump administration, the volatility, the uncertainty that we've seen, and how much longer they'll almost allow it to happen before they send some sort of signal saying they will no longer allow it to happen. And your currency gets weaker. Yes, there are positives. You can be a lot more sort of competitive in international markets and things like that. But at the same time, the value of the money in your pocket does get weaker, and that is unfortunate. Due to speak to Daniel Mminele, the chair of Nedbank, in a few moments.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, let's go to business books now. And the book this week is The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society. It's by Joseph Stiglitz, someone who's played a big role in international conversations around finance and economies, who worked in the Clinton administration some time ago. Ian Mann's the Managing Director at Gateways Business Consultants. Ian, good evening. Thanks so much for coming in tonight.
Good evening to you. I found this book.
Go on. I was going to say, Stiglitz is not happy with the state of capitalism. He has some major critiques to make.
Very, and they're clever. He opens the book with a very interesting thought experiment. He says the thought experiment was actually developed by the philosopher John Rawls. But he says, if you didn't know what you'd be born into in a country, you didn't know whether you'd be rich, you didn't know whether you'd be poor, you didn't know whether you'd be sick, you didn't know whether you'd be part of the majority or part of the minority, what sort of society would you want to live in that would ensure that irrespective of what you were in terms of status, you would be able to live a free and a full life? And I think that's the starting point of this whole discussion. His book has a look at what sort of economic systems we've gone through. A large part of the book is simply talking about the background to this, and he goes back as far as feudalism in the Middle Ages. And feudalism we know of most popularly from Europe, but was also in China and Japan and a lot of other countries as well. So what happened was the king owned everything, and he appointed lords whom he gave large estates to. And the lords gave him to vassals in exchange for their loyalty and for being soldiers. And then the vassals below them had peasants who worked the land and gave the lord money, large amounts of their money to allow them to live on the land. So in an environment like that, which is very rigid and hierarchical, all the power was really in the hands of the nobility, and there was low economic growth and slow social progress. If you were a peasant, you never ever got up to being a lord or even a vassal. And probably communism was a response directly to that. And what the communists proposed was, and what they tried to develop was a society that would give people security and also equality, material equality. They failed. They had low economic growth. There was no freedom, and a concentration of power, which simply replaced the wealthy people who was now the party. The result of that was inefficiency, lack of incentive, lower productivity, and very slow economic growth. And then capitalism comes in. Now, capitalism historically has generated more wealth than any other form of economics. The GDP is high, the tech innovations significantly better, there's improved standards of living, and all of this, I suppose if you wanted to pick up the background to the type of economics that he's repulsed by, it's probably started off with a phrase that everybody remembers from Adam Smith. Adam Smith, the economist, said that there's an invisible hand, and that the baker bakes good bread at a good price, not because he's altruistic, but because if he does that, he's going to get rich and the people around him will have access to bread at a good price. Then along comes Milton Friedman. This is in the 60s, and he was he believed that in markets, essentially, he said markets will make everything, will fix everything. Communism had no free markets. He says capitalism has got to have free markets, have minimal government intervention. They'll be markets will function best if governments just get out of the way, and we'll make this whole thing work, but only by allowing the market to do what markets do best. And that's to make as much money for as they can, mainly for their shareholders, and that'll lead to better economic outcomes for everyone. So deregulate, keep the taxes as low as you can, allow people to get as rich as you can. Ronald Reagan passed a comment on that, and this was in the 80s. He said governments are not the solution to the problem.
Yeah, they are the problem.
Are the problem. Yeah. And so what he suggested, what he was promoting, and Reaganism is coming back again and again, is limited government and free market policies. Now, that sounds extraordinarily good. Here's the problem. The problem is that it has created extraordinary wealth in the world. Really, and we've never ever had growth and wealth like this ever before in human history. The richest 1%, however, they have more wealth than the bottom 95% of humanity. So you've got a tiny group of people at the top, extraordinarily rich, and they have the money and they control 43% of global financial assets. Now, in a world that is that split with huge numbers of people, millions of people in poverty or very low levels of economic activity, grinding out every single day to try and make a living. And capitalism doesn't sound like such a great idea. And this is where Stiglitz comes in with his new view of what capitalism should be.
Okay, so that's the critique, and it's a critique many people are making, particularly at the moment with the sort of tech bros, etc. So what does he suggest there should be? I mean, he does suggest quite an active role for government, and as I understand it, makes the point that you need government to regulate traffic lights, for example.
I think what he does importantly is the key is this: we want to regulate, and he believes that we need to have taxes. Now, if you said a country where people are free is a company where they have the vote. But if you're starving, the vote doesn't count terribly much, and if you can't live to your full potential, it doesn't do very much. So if we had to, Isaiah Berlin put this really nicely. He said, freedom for the wolves usually means death for the sheep. Now, if you stop somebody's freedom to do what they want with the money that they have, you're enriching somebody else. So what you could say is, well, take a lot of money from the rich and give it to the poor. Well, why, if a rich person made that money, worked hard for that money, has that money honestly, why should you take it away from him? And what Stiglitz suggests we have to do is we have to understand that we need governments because we need governments to ensure that there's fair competition. And this is important because we know that the rich have got extraordinary power over government over governments. If you look at how many people gave lots of money to Trump and were invited to his Mar-a-Lago, you can see how much power money has. And that power cannot be necessarily used for the good of the poor. In fact, there's a lot of reasons to believe it isn't. So he believed that we have to have government, but we also have to have fair competition.
Ian Mann, I'm so sorry, we'll have to leave it there. Ian Mann's the Managing Director at Gateways Business Consultants. The book is The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society by Joseph Stiglitz.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
A new paper out calling for South Africa and, in fact, countries on our continent to be more involved in global financial reform, essentially calling on us and others in Africa to push harder for the reform of global institutions that manage money, in particular around the way in which the debt of countries is managed. One of the co-authors of the paper is the current chair of Nedbank, Daniel Mminele. You may recall he's also a former deputy governor at the Reserve Bank. Mr. Mminele, good evening. It's good to hear from you again, sir. We can see we're living in troubled financial times. What do you believe South Africa and countries on the continent with us should be doing?
Hi, Stephen. Good to talk to you again, and thanks for the invitation to the Money Show. Really, the piece is about a call to action, as you said in your intro, actually about, seeking to leverage the opportunities that are currently available to amplify Africa's voice in global governance forums, so to speak. And it actually arises from a number of recent developments which we think should be leveraged, starting from last year, for instance, when what I think can only be described as a watershed moment, when the AU became a full member of the G20. And also last year, you may recall that at the IMF, they expanded its executive board specifically to accommodate a third seat for Africa so that we can have a third constituency there. And our piece talks to yet another opportunity, which is the third opportunity to leverage, namely that the G20 is being hosted on the African soil for the first time since it's been elevated to leaders level. So we're saying, let's grab this opportunity and highlight the role that Africa can and should be playing in future global economic development on the back of the issues that are well known, our demographics. We're a young and growing continent, infrastructure development needs, our abundant natural resources, the opportunities to leapfrog when it comes to technology, and so forth. So the areas that we've chosen have been really carefully chosen to illustrate how we need to become part of the shaping forces in how the world should change. You touched on one of them, which is around improving the sovereign debt architecture. The other one is around, strengthening what is called global financial safety nets. And the third one is around mobilizing climate finance. And they were carefully chosen because we thought they actually meet the sweet spot in terms of the G20 being a global forum. So what you need to do to get the interest of the membership is to find themes that are globally relevant, themes that we thought ought to speak to African challenges, and at the same time, they very much speak to our own challenges in this country as the presidency of the G20. So that's really what it's about.
So I mean, I fully appreciate what you're saying, and I'm nodding my head as I listen to you. I worry if power doesn't really work like that, that maybe we're not rich enough to have a loud enough voice, and that I fear the world is moving once again to a place where the rich and powerful make the rules, and that may make this an uphill task.
But the issue, Stephen, as I said, it's about longer term orientation. Where is future growth going to come from? As I said, in 2050, if you take just the horizon that many people refer to when they talk about sort of transition to net zero and so forth, 1 in 4 persons on the continent will be African by then, and they'll be young, they'll be growing. We've got the critical minerals that people need to transition their economies to low carbon and more climate resilient societies. And so, our voice should be heard because we are going to form a shaping force of future growth and development.
A big way to do this, of course, is to mobilize. We shouldn't be the only ones. It's other countries in Africa and perhaps some other countries, other members of the Global South as well. Lots of opportunities to work together here?
Absolutely. I mean, this all calls for collaborative problem solving. Absolutely right. And particularly one which requires joining forces of public and private sectors. And an event like the G20 working together with, for instance, as the B20 are ideal fora to push forward these opportunities to leverage and amplify Africa's voice.
You seem particularly concerned about the growing risk of debt defaults, and you suggest the international system is not able to properly restructure debt. What kind of change do you think we're going to need there?
Look, I mean, the reason for that, and that's why we're highlighting it, Stephen, is that, improving the sovereign debt architecture, which is woefully inadequate at the moment, is absolutely critical to support sort of economic stability, to support growth, job creation, and also to address some of the social and political challenges that would come in the absence of stability and growth. So we need new debt arrangements that will at least give the African continent a fighting chance, in the sense that you need to find an appropriate balance between sustainability, whether in the broader sense or whether it's fiscal sustainability and development needs. So we need to be at the center of these negotiations and crowd in the domestic and international and private sector. And that includes strengthening what people refer to as the global financial safety nets, which is kind of all these arrangements around how countries support each other when they're facing economic distress or they're in crisis, which includes the IMF, the World Bank, bilateral, multilateral arrangements, multinational development banks, how we ensure that access and resources that are available can be done fairly, that there's even-handedness in how countries are treated. It's those kind of things.
Daniel Mminele, good to talk to you again, sir. Thank you very much indeed. The chair at Nedbank, also, of course, a former deputy governor at the Reserve Bank, and someone who's been very, very involved in finance for quite some time, and the co-author of that paper. It is an interesting point just to make and to sort of think about, is what can, being chair of the G20, what can we do with that? How can we use it, if you like, to start certain processes? Maybe this is the beginning of that, to start certain processes and to go from there, knowing that they'll continue once our chairmanship of it has passed, particularly when you consider who the next chair of the G20 is. You're with The Money Show at 7:30.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
23 minutes now to 8 the time. Well, I'm sure you've noticed that health and fitness is big business. There are many ways to capitalize on it, and one person who's been able to do just that is Lisa Raleigh, founder of the Lisa Raleigh Group, very involved in the health and fitness industry. Lisa, good evening, and thanks so much for joining us on The Money Show tonight to tell us your story.
Thank you so much for having me. Excuse me, I'm a little bit out of breath. I've literally just gotten out of a class about 8 minutes ago.
Well, take it from me. You can't.
I'm not going to sound unfit on this call.
Well, you can't do exercise. You cannot walk and talk at the same time on the radio. Trust me, I've tried it many, many times. So I'll let you just catch your breath for a second. But you had, lots of people come into businesses that they start in different ways. But yours is the first I've heard where it actually all started from a television program and things went from there. You're going to have to tell us the story of how you ended up on this television program in the first place. And then instead of sort of leaving it there, having achieved what you wanted to achieve, went from there.
So yeah, I mean, my career started quite a few years before I made it onto a South African program called The Biggest Loser, which was just incredibly, I want to call it lucky, because I was probably one of hundreds of different personal trainers.
Lisa Raleigh, I don't know if you're still with us or not. I seem to have lost you there. Let me just see if we are able to hear you. Lisa, are you still with us? All right, we'll try and sort out that line. Sorry about that. It is an astonishing story. It's a story that is not something you hear very often, in fact, in terms of how someone entered the business that they did. But it did come from a television program. We'll just get Lisa Raleigh back for you to tell you the story herself. Perhaps she felt that she needed to just catch her breath a little bit after that exercise that she had been conducting. Maybe that is the reason. But let's just see if we're able to get her back. I think, Lisa, you're back with us now. You were saying you'd actually been you'd been a fitness instructor for some time.
Yeah, for a few years before then. And, auditions were out. I submitted my CV. I had to do a one-on-one with them. I had to motivate an obese client that I had never met before. I had to speak on camera. I'd never done that before. And I must be honest, I was lucky. And it was my time and it was my turn. And I got this amazing platform in which to showcase what I was passionate about. And I will forever be grateful to that show, because not every single personal trainer, fitness, enthusiast gets the opportunity that I got to be on such a platform. So I embraced it with all of me. And after I'd done the show, which was 12 weeks of vigorous shooting, I almost lost my business at the time, because what we signed on the contract and what we actually had to deliver was two very different things. I mean, I was on set all day, all night, weekends. It was intense. And I still had 3 gyms at that stage to run, and staff and clients. And it was really intense. It was probably the most stressful yet rewarding time in my career. I just remember being so stretched, and it was really tough. Anyway, when I'd finished the show, within weeks of finishing the show, my phone blew up, my emails, my website, of people asking me for the same experience. I lived in Durban at the time, and the entire show was shot there in the North Coast. And people just begging me, please, I want what those Biggest Losers had. I will pay anything. I'll come and live in Durban if I have to for 12 weeks or 6 months. Please change my life. So I actually put together a beautiful weight loss and wellness program, and I developed that into something that I could duplicate. And then I just got a little bit frustrated selling time. And I think that for me was a big lesson. Many years ago, I was like, I am never going to be able to help all the people in the world that I want to help if I'm putting a price on my hours. And so I just started developing online platforms, online tuition, online programs, things that were duplicable, things that could scale, things that people could do around the world, and in any room, on any platform. It was just like, for me, I needed to be in everybody's lounge. I could not just have people come to me and sell every hour of my day. So that whole show gave me that opportunity to be on television, to be seen by lots of people all over, and then to use that platform for further television and further radio and further articles and a life in the media, really, that I was able to take my vision into people's homes. And I will forever be grateful for that opportunity.
It's interesting you talk about the reaction to you winning the show, people saying, I'll move to Durban. I mean, gosh, I'm in Cape Town at the moment, and I know some people who just refuse to move to Joburg no matter what happens, despite my best efforts. There's a kind of a desperation. I mean, people are desperate for many things, but part of it is controlling their own bodies and controlling their own lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, isn't your wealth your health? I mean, when you don't have your health, then you have one really big problem, right? It's like you can't do anything or enjoy your life, or work properly, have relationships, experience, travel, do anything if you don't have your health. That's all you worry about every single day. So people are desperate because they're not necessarily living their best quality of life. They want to learn how to be better. They don't want to be bedridden. They don't want to be relying on medical savings and going to the doctor every 5 seconds. I see a lot of really unwell people every single day. And they are a mirror for me to uphold my lifestyle, because they show me every day that if I don't look after myself and put myself first and be selfish to be selfless, and that has been my motto for many years, guys, nothing else matters but your health, because when you don't have it, then you have nothing. So I try as best I can to tell people that when you put yourself first in the morning and you make yourself a lunch, or you give yourself 15 minutes for breakfast, or you spend time exercising, and you tell your whole family, listen, this is my 30 minutes. When you claim it and you prioritize it, you should be feeling like this is the most selfless thing you're doing, because it's actually enabling you to live your best life, to be productive, to thrive in business, to be a good partner, to be an energetic mother or father. Everybody should respect you for it. And what I am finding, compared to 15 years ago 20 years ago when I first started my career, if you were in the health and fitness industry, it was kind of like you were vain. You're a musclehead, or there were all these labels, like you're a freak, and you must be so into yourself, and you put your fitness and your health above everything else. But now the narrative is definitely changing. I've seen it change, especially in the last 5 years. People that are saying, sorry, I can only start my meeting at 8 because I have a trainer, or I go to a class, or whatever it is. Like you look at those people like, bravo, you're actually putting your health first, and it's becoming this thing to be respected. So that's been amazing to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a real transformation. I've got some more questions about that in a moment. I do want to just go back a little bit, maybe just to before the television show. You said you had 3 gyms then. How did you open the first one? Where did the money come from? And I ask because there is a lot of competition. There's sort of some 1 or 2 that dominate. You have to take them on. You have to provide something that they don't, and they come with more money than you do.
Yeah. Well, let's just go way back, because I was 19 years old when I started it. So I'm 42 now. Oh, my goodness. So 23 years ago, having a personal gym, having a private gym at home, having clients, it was not nearly as common as it is today. There was no social media at all. There were no fitfluencers or influencers, and very few little private gyms anyway. So I was like one of the first in KZN. I had gone overseas to Wales, and I had done some experience over there. I'd studied and then went over there as working as a personal trainer. And why Wales? Because my boyfriend at the time, he was a rugby player and played for like a club there. So I went there and I lived there for 2 years, and I got some cool experience, came back and then started a mobile personal training gym. So I didn't have the funds to set up, a R500,000 gym. I couldn't do it. So what I did is I had my little rusty Corsa, I remember it so clearly, and a couple of pieces of home gym equipment that were easy to travel with. So one was actually a rebounder, believe it or not, which is something that I'm known for now. An exercise steps, some weights, some skipping ropes, some dumbbells, some stretchy bands, resistance bands. And I started with my mom's best friend, and then she told a friend, and then I put pamphlets underneath car windscreens. I had like my little, promise you, I've still got the first first flyer that I ever made, it had a tape measure like stuck on it, and then I photostated that. And that's what I did. I just marketed myself, and I got 4 clients, then 8 clients, then 12 clients, and I would drive to their homes, unpack everything, put on music, give them a workout, pack it all back into my car to the next client. And so that happened for about a year until I got a bit frustrated, driving around, traffic, accidents, And so I got my parents' home that I was living with at the time. I was 20, I think, at that stage. I asked them for a room, if I could please have a room, and then I would convert that into my little gym. And they were very happy for me to do it. They were very serious with me, though. I had to pay rent. I had to pay my way from the get-go. Yeah. I mean, nothing was for free. So, and that's a good lesson that they taught me from a young age, to be responsible. And my kind of relationship with money goes way before that also with my mom and dad. But anyway, so I started like that until it became a little bit too busy. And I had like a waiting list, which was amazing. And it was really just word of mouth. I didn't have money for marketing. There was no social media. So a friend would tell a friend, bring 2 friends. And before I knew it, my little gym was packed. And then I got premises. And when that gym was packed, I got a second space, like further up in Hillcrest area in KZN. And then I had a lot of Muslim clientele. Like I had probably 80% of my clients were female Muslim ladies. And they couldn't be seen by men. So what I did is I opened up a women's only facility called Go Figure at the time. And so I had 3 of these gyms that I was running. And I did that for about 5 years. Every day, every night, every weekend, and I had loads of trainers working for me. And then I got this opportunity on The Biggest Loser, and that just catapulted me to another level.
It's amazing
to... I think probably 8,000 Rand. I think that's how much I had in my bank account, and that's what I had to buy my home gym equipment. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, the idea, Lisa, that you were literally putting, leaflets under people's windows. I mean, I love that on people's windscreens and things, and very much
and
involved
in post boxes. Can you believe it? Yes. Like in my neighborhood post box. Yeah.
I can't imagine that. So one of the things, I mean, this is going to sound like such a strange question, but okay, so you were younger then than you are now. You're still, I'm sure, a lot fitter than I am. But when you spend the day exercising, I mean. Yes. That must be, I mean, when I talk to people my age, and I'm not that much older than you, I'm in just the same decade that you are, and someone will say to me, if you had a weekend to yourself, of, my children and my wife are away and I don't have to do anything, what am I going to do? I'm going to exercise. I'm going to get on my bicycle and go, and I know exactly where I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for as far as I can and all the rest.
Yes.
But when you're exercising 5 days a week, what's that kind of like? I mean, do you ever get a bit sick of it? Do you ever wake up in the morning and think, actually, I can't do it today? Do you actually get to the end of a week and think that was great?
Okay, so before, let me explain. So when I was a lot younger and when I was doing this private gym situation, the type of exercise that I did was land-based. So I did everything with, weights, functional training with weights, and I did, your normal personal training. Then, you use your cardio equipment. So you use your treadmill and your bike and your stationary equipment. That for me is like a hamster on a wheel. Like I cannot do that kind of training anymore. And then I used to run. I used to run outside a lot and therefore quite injured a lot of the time, like a sore knee while I was going to the physio. So like that was the kind of exercise that I was doing for many, many years. In fact, 2 decades. And always nursing an injury, always putting it off. I felt like the only way I could really exercise if I was like trying to train for a race, like a reason, or with my clients in like a class environment or something like that. I really didn't enjoy it because I was always in pain. The exercise that I now do for the last 8 years, which is the only kind of exercise that I do on a daily basis, is something that is pain-free, it's low impact, it's super fun, it's music-based, and it's resistance and cardio in one. So it's like time effective. And that's rebounding. That's exercising on a mini trampoline. I've literally just got off a rebounder now with 50 people in my class. It was epic. Like the energy in the room, everyone's bouncing, everyone's smiling, no one's in pain. I cannot even describe to you how different this type of training is. And for me, I never procrastinate or put it off. And I don't actually spend the day training. I only train 1 hour a day, never more than that. Like never. And the rest of the day, I actually shoot content we've got a big subscription service. So we're shooting content all the time for that platform, for our clients that are global now, to be able to exercise in the comfort of their own homes. And what I've done is I've had a course running for about 5 years. I've trained about 650 instructors now globally. And that instructor course, I handpick trainers that I've found, like in Joburg, because I'm in Joburg at the moment. And those I've handpicked and hand-reared, and they've brought their own beautiful principles as well and their own energy, and we've applied all the Bounti principles. Bounti is the name of my rebounding business. And now I have a ton of instructors. So I don't have to take 5 classes a day, 10 classes a day. I do 1 class in the studio 3 times a week. And the other times I'm shooting content.
Sure.
And they take the classes because I knew that selling time is not the way to be financially free. You know, I cannot do that. And also, you're enabling other people to own their own business, which is awesome. It's a great feeling.
No, it absolutely is. We're speaking to Lisa Raleigh, the founder of the Lisa Raleigh Group. How to make money from health and fitness. Her story on The Money Show tonight.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Speaking to Lisa Raleigh, founder of the Lisa Raleigh Group, who's been able to make money out of health and fitness and really create an amazing career and an amazing company. Lisa, things happen to companies and you can be surprised. You know, famously, Kodak was going to last forever and doesn't really exist anymore. And I do wonder what is happening in your industry around weight loss drugs, the way people see the way the medical profession sees being overweight and obesity has changed. I think many people now see it as a disease that requires a medical intervention of some kind. You get various weight loss drugs now, usually using insulin. I mean, people are still going to want to exercise, and I think you should still, no matter what you're doing. It does suggest, though, there may be a little bit less demand, or that the services that you provide may have to change?
Well, what we do is we try and, we are forever educating. We have newsletters and blogs and social media, and we are forever educating people about the importance of building muscle mass. Like, all of those drugs, as amazing as some of them are for specific requirements, like those that have got obesity or, diabetes or insulin resistance. And yes, I know there's the different brands you're talking about, and it's becoming bigger and bigger, but we also work quite closely with the medical industry and with doctors and dietitians that are prescribing these drugs. Because one thing that is very apparent, and all the science is there, is how they are depleting one's muscle mass. And if you are taking these kind of drugs and you are not actually counteracting the side effects of them, which is the loss of it's called sarcopenia, the loss of lean muscle tissue, you are going to destroy your metabolic rate over time. And that is going to age you like you have no idea. Like if your muscles are breaking down naturally and then you go and add a drug like that, every year you're just exacerbating the problem until you are left with very, very low muscle mass, therefore very low bone density. Your metabolism is completely shot, and your chance of longevity is limited. So we are doing a lot of education, and we're trying to work closely with doctors and dietitians to just make sure that, yes, it's all good and well taking these drugs, but the long-term side effects of them have to be disclosed. And that's where I think a lot of the Instagram posts and a lot of the Twitter posts, a lot of the blogs and articles are coming out about, guys, all good and well losing this body fat, hindering your appetite and all of that. Are you thinking about the long-term effects of these drugs, which some of them have only been used for a couple of years? And so we are pushing back hard all the time, saying it's great, lose the body fat, get assisted aid with these products. If you've got a medical condition, fantastic, use them. But please don't forget about something that is literally the longevity answer in everybody's life, and that is lean muscle tissue. So it's not, we don't focus on everything we focus on with the rebounding, with weight training. It's just about muscle, muscle, muscle. So yes, we do have to adapt. We do have to evolve. We do have to work with these professionals. But luckily, a lot of them are very educated and are a little bit more balanced. They're not just trying to sell drugs, but they're actually wanting to have clients that are healthy and whole and thriving way beyond 2 years from now once they've lost the weight. What happens then when they're looking awful?
It's interesting, and I also have, and I'm no medical expert at all, so I also worry a little bit about the sort of short-term nature of what we're seeing. But there's clearly a big thing. Aligned with that, Lisa, is I notice, and maybe it's just because I'm coming to the end of the decade that you and I have in common, but more people who are older are doing exercise for longer. I mean, there's a generational shift. I don't think people who are in their 70s and 80s now were doing cycling races or walking, whatever. Things have definitely changed. And that must mean for you, for what you do, the chances are that actually the market of people who you are sort of going to be maturing with is going to be huge. People are going to want your services for a lot longer than they would have before, is my point.
Yeah, well, we're seeing that already. So for the last, say, 18 months or so, we've started a new series of Bounti classes, so that's on the rebounder. So we first started with Glow, and that was for your ladies over 60, so gorgeous ladies over the age of. And we have an amazing instructor in her 60s that shoots all of these programs for us, and she's never looked better in her life. She's never felt better. She goes on socials and does videos for us all the time saying, I've never been able to do this kind of exercise. I've never been looked better. I've never looked younger. I've never been complimented as much. And yet I'm the oldest I've ever been. So that's about 18 months ago. We started with that demographic. And now we've gone one decade higher. So now 70 to 75, we call them Bounti Silver clients. We have a class every Wednesday here in the studio, and we'll be developing more and more classes. At the moment, we're busy doing R&D on this age group, and we don't charge for them. So if you're in that age group, you can come to the studio. We have a trainer every Wednesday, and you can come and bounce for free with a handlebar and modifications and age-appropriate music. And these ladies and gents are absolutely loving the ability to be vertical. They don't have to be in a pool.
Sure.
They don't have to be just doing Pilates. They are able to do something that's on their feet, that gets their heart rate up. They're a bit sweaty, they're a bit tired. They've got a professional in the room. There's music that's for them, and they are loving it. And we are...
Lisa, I will have to leave it there. That's a fantastic story. Lisa Raleigh, I've really appreciated the time. Thank you. Founder of the Lisa Raleigh Group.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, that's it from The Money Show tonight. Plenty to look forward to. Tomorrow is Memorial Day in the States, so US markets are closed. I suspect there's a lot for them to react to when they open tomorrow. Good evening, it's 8 o'clock.